I'm John, and tonight I want answers about transgender people. There's no stopping us now because we're live.
John wants answers. John wants answers. Give John answers. Give John answers. John wants answers. John wants answers. Give John answers now.
Check your calendar. If it says August 8th, 2013, then we're live. My guest tonight is Lisa Lippincott. Thanks for being on the show, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Lisa is my expert tonight because she's a transgender woman. We'll be taking your tweets. You can tweet us during the show at John Wants Answer. There's no S on the end because the S is for suck, and we don't. Tweet us with your questions, and we'll get to them later in the show. If you don't want to use Twitter, and I don't blame you, you can go to our website. Go to johnwantsanswers.com, and there's an S on that one. Go to the contact page, and then we'll read those messages too. We have a Twitter contest. Be the first person to tweet in or message in saying you want an autographed headshot, and I'll autograph this promotional photo for you and send it to you. And I'll even personalize it. I'll be like, "Dear viewer," and viewer will be like your name, not the word viewer. I'm behind. If you've won one in the last 6 to 8 months, it's coming. This show could not be made without the generosity of our executive producers, Brian Westbefall and Lisa Tamaki. Man, I am messing all this up. I think they're going to stop sponsoring the show after this. All right. Let's get started. Our first topic, transgender people. Where is that noise coming from? Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you.
So what's the correct terminology? Now, we kind of rehearsed before the show, and I guess transgender people is what we agreed on. Before that, I was saying transgendered American, which is wrong on multiple counts, right?
Well, I am an American also. And,
yes, but transgenderism is not exclusive to Americans.
True.
Yeah. And transgender is not a verb.
Transgender, pretty much not a verb. You don't have to put ed on the end of it, though you see that sometimes.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's an adjective. People use trans for short. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a lot more convenient than having how many syllables that is. I don't know.
But then people might get confused, like trans what?
Yes, it could be. I could be a transcontinental person, but.
So let's understand what it means. What does transgender person mean?
Transgender person means I was raised as a male, found out that wasn't really for me, and decided to become female. And so what I've done is crossed gender. It's Greek, you see. Trans is crossing.
I was going to ask about that. I thought it was transcended gender.
Well, there might be a little bit of that in it too, but really crossing.
So transgender and trans is the correct terms to use.
Yes.
Now there's incorrect terms to use.
Yes.
I think the slang tranny, which is we stay away from.
Not considered nice.
Is it because of historical reasons, or because when people use it, they're not pure of heart?
I think that there's a certain amount of both. I think that, you know, you can get away with a lot if you smile when you say this, and you know, we know you have the right attitude. But really, I think it's the porn connection that makes it get on a lot of people's nerves. Oh. And any word that you're more likely to see on the box of a porn video than used in the newspaper. It's probably one that you don't want to describe people with most of the time.
Right. Our floor director, Keith, could learn from that. Is there, so I've heard of like cross-dressers and drag queens and transvestites. Would you consider them to be transgender?
They're, in the broad term, yes. So anything that really mixes up gender can be considered transgender. And people are usually only considered transgender if they do it a lot.
Okay.
So, for example, in some ways you could consider, if you think that it's a masculine thing to be interested in women, then you would consider a man being interested in men transgender behavior. On the other hand, we are more enlightened now. We don't think that it is necessarily masculine to be interested in women and feminine to be interested in men. Mm-hmm. So these days, that's not considered to be transgender behavior. But it's really a matter of how the idea of gendered behavior has changed over time in some cases.
When I worked at Apple, there was a guy, and he had a faux beard, mm-hmm. but he also wore a woman's skirt and women's shoes all the time. So he's dressing like a woman, but he's chosen to have a beard. What would you call that? Is that?
That's a kind of transgender. It's often called, some people call it genderqueer, mm-hmm. or if he's doing it, I'm assuming he is the appropriate pronoun.
As far as that, well, yeah.
It's sometimes hard to tell with trans people, and it is okay if you're polite to ask which pronoun to use. But
mm-hmm. Given the beard, he looks like I'm calling him he. That he's advertising himself as male.
Let's go with he then. Mixing up things in that very forward sort of, I'm going to give you cognitive dissonance with your gendered ideas in your head way is sometimes called gender fuck. Mm-hmm. You told me I could say that on the air.
Now we're PG-13.
Mm-hmm. So that's a kind of transgender person.
Okay. Transgender people are often combined into a group called LGBT, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Mm-hmm. Now, the first three are all sexual orientation. So It seems like the transgender is a bit like a separate thing.
There are some people who would rather they be separate on both sides. But really, what brings us together is that the people that have problems with gay and lesbian and bisexual people also have similar problems with trans people most of the time, and vice versa. And they don't really make the distinction. So there's a kind of shared oppression. And in fact, you'll often see that the lesbians who get the most flack are the butch lesbians. And, maybe I'm sure that femme lesbians have, their problems too. But butch lesbians and feminine men are often the people who get the brunt of the discrimination.
Right.
So there is a gender component to how the rest of the world reacts to all of these people.
All right. Now, I know about 4 transgender people, and they're all trans women. So they are originally were men, and now are women. And they all seem to, after they've transitioned to being a woman, are in relationships with other women. So is it true that most people who transgender to women are now lesbians?
No, it's, well, I couldn't say is it more or less than half, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I haven't read any statistics on that that seem particularly reliable. It is true that all the possible combinations that you can think of happen. Mm-hmm. There are trans women who were attracted to women before they transitioned and are still attracted to women. Mm-hmm. There are trans women who are attracted to women before they transitioned and then became attracted to men, I've even met people that were surprised by the change when they, they transition and, a few years, sometime after transition, just thought, hey, men or sometimes women are seeming a lot more interesting to me than they used to. And the same thing goes, the same thing goes for, I know trans women who were attracted to men before they transitioned and now are not. And the same thing goes for trans men. I don't know as many of them, but I've run into what seemed to me a surprising number of trans men who were attracted to women before they transitioned and now are attracted to men. So
all combinations.
They're all out there.
Yeah, all the trans people I know are trans women. And do you think it's more common to go trans women or versus trans men, or you don't know? Or
I've read that the statistics are very similar. But again, trans people are very hard to study. So I'm not, they certainly aren't radically different.
Okay. So let's talk about your experiences figuring out that being a man was not for you. So how old do you think you were when you realized something was amiss?
So it's, I can think back to maybe, there were definitely hints by the time I was 10 or 11. And I can, by the time, I think sometime when I was in high school, I saw an article in the newspaper about Renee Richards, who was a trans woman and became rather famous for her, for being in professional tennis. And I remember reading that article and thinking that she was like me. And then, it was much later, sort of things piled up. I read a lot about trans people in the medical library when I was in college.
Okay.
That was a little distressing because I was reading, the psychological papers and things for doctors, and it made being trans seem very scary and off-putting. It's actually a lot nicer than medical papers in the 80s described it.
Okay.
But in some sense, I wasn't sure until I actually started to transition, and.
So you started transitioning before you were actually sure that was what you wanted?
I took a good guess, and I think that's pretty much all anybody can do.
So you were in your 20s at this point, it sounds like.
I was almost 30.
Almost 30,
yeah.
Okay. So I've read news articles where young people, like age 6, there was actually a news article about a 6-year-old who wanted to transgender, and I think it was a boy who wanted to be a girl. And I was wondering if, at that early age, do you think it's possible to know that you want to be transgender? Could you be confused? Maybe you're gay? Do you think they can know at that age?
It's hard to say. I think it's, it's very hard to be sure what you want to be when you grow up. If you'd asked me when I was, 6, whether I wanted to be a mathematician when I grew up, I might have said yes. That was sort of a possibility for me. I think the same thing applies to gender. Even young, some people can take a good guess, other people are less sure. Usually what people do when this happens, assuming that the parents are supportive of transitioning, is they do transition socially and see what it's like to live the other gender. And if, it's not like they're doing something that can't be undone. It's
Right.
just, it's socially a little awkward because some people are not cool about it. But, you know, it's something that you can give a try. And if you try it and you like it, you know,
You can stay with it.
you can stick with it. And
I had heard that there's a medical test, like a genetic test or something, that can determine that, in fact, you were born the wrong gender. Is that true?
I haven't heard anything like that. I did see a study that that suggested that by dissecting your brain, it's possible to take a guess as to whether you're transgender or not. But that's a
like
little
physically
more. Yes,
dissecting?
it's only been done to corpses.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, that's not the
so
way to go.
that's not so good. And even if there was such a test, it would seem awfully mean to tell somebody who is sure that they're not transgender that, oh no, you really are.
Turns out I got the results right
you know,
here. and
yeah.
Things don't look good for you.
Yeah, or vice versa. Well, there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
But or vice versa, tell somebody who is sure they're transgender that they're not. It's like if there were a medical test to see whether or not you enjoy broccoli. It wouldn't really be cool to go to people and say, your test results say you shouldn't be eating that broccoli, it'll taste bad.
Is there a better term? So I've been saying, what if you're born the wrong gender? Is there a better term than saying wrong gender?
Well, in some sense, I think the tricky thing may be the born, not the wrong gender. Because gender is really something that that is about our interaction with society. It's about the expectations we have in conversation and and how we interact with other people. So, in some sense, you're not born a gender. It's the people around you decide what your gender ought to be and start interacting with you that way. Now, it's true that we have certain ways of, you know, taking a look at the baby and taking a guess what their gender is going to come out as, and it's right, you know, 99 times out of 100 or even more.
Right.
So it works pretty well most of the time, and we just have to deal with the fact that it doesn't work every time.
So when a girl is growing up and she acts masculine, they call her a tomboy. And that's, you know, generally accepted, and it's not necessarily a bad word. And I guess they have similar phrases for men who act like girls. Would you describe that's how you were growing up? Like, did you make more friends that were female and want to do more female activities?
Not too much. You know, I was not. I was never, you know, one of the guys. I was always kind of the odd one out. Growing up, I really didn't put that to gender at all. I figured it, you know, I was always the smallest kid in my class, and I always figured that was some of it. And I didn't have, like, sports just didn't get me, and that sort of bonding didn't work for me.
Sounds like all, you know, tech geeks.
Yes.
Kind of.
I kind of, you know, I kind of grew up as the, you know, little geek kid. And that's...
All right. Well, we've got to take a break.
Okay.
So when we come back, we're going to take your tweets and answer your questions, and we'll have more with Lisa. So see you in a second. By a second, I actually mean like 2 minutes. So my phone's been buzzing. I probably should have silenced
Things are going buzz all over the place.
Speak of the
There is
device.
some woman named Stacy Tamaki on the internet,
Yes?
and she tweeted in and said, "Stop talking about her."
I mentioned her the one time, right? Whoa. There's like,
She
got
wants
a
to
good
take
lawsuit.
she wants to take no credit for your show.
oh, she's made that clear a long time ago.
It's never good to get your wife and your wife's sister mixed up. I've learned that lesson the hard way.
Oh, really? I had the Tamaki part in my head, and mostly I talk about Stacy Tamaki. Okay. I have a tweet. He's watching. He's the wrong first name for that. Yeah. Okay. So we have a tweet. Now I promised I would read their messages from the website. One month I forgot about that, but no one sent one anyways.
Well, we're pretty sure the internet was down that half hour, because that's the only thing that can explain it.
I think I'm getting text messages more than anything else. Let's see.
But I know all the people who send you email. How could that be?
I don't have a big viewing base, perhaps, of the live show. Are we going so far so good?
I think so.
Have I done anything terribly embarrassing yet?
I don't know. Should I slap you?
If one of the commercials is about 5 times as loud as your show. Commercials? We're playing commercials? Your feed disappeared at 9:45. Oh, back.
Your feet disappeared?
Feed.
God, I'm back.
Are we back?
Oh.
5, 4.
And we're back! And we're going to take your tweets. Most of the tweets are about how you can't hear me. So I can't do anything about that. There's a tweet about the video going out, but that's back now. So no problem there. And yes, at the start of the show, I mentioned the wrong Tamaki. I'm very sorry. And I said her last name wrong because when she's not here in the studio, I say her name wrong as punishment for not being here. And that's all our tweets. So we can get back to the topic at hand. Where did we leave off? What made you think you should have been transgender instead of homosexual?
Well, homosexual, well, now I am. But no, growing up, guys did not interest me. Mm-hmm. And, well,
I can relate.
And so homosexual just didn't seem like it was the thing for me. And now guys do not interest me. And mm-hmm. And lo and behold, I find myself lesbian. It was a bit, it's like I had to wrap my head around that a little. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that one was actually pretty easy for me. Okay. I'd read a few things from, some of the people who were a bit surprised after they transitioned. And so I was kind of keeping an eye out to see if, people like you became more interesting mm-hmm. than they were. And
people like me are rarely interesting. All right. So what did you come out to other people indicating that this is something that transgender is something you'd want to be?
Yeah. So that was when I think 28 or 29, a little hard to, that's a while ago now.
Yeah. 5 years ago, I imagine.
Yeah, it was, it was around the time I was finishing graduate school, so mm-hmm. I can sort of date it from that. And I, started small with a few friends and sort of eventually, decided, yes, I'm going with this, and told everyone. I remember, my apologies to my Tai Chi class, they were the last people I told. In part because I wanted to honestly be able to tell my parents they were not the last ones to know.
Okay. Were people surprised?
So I was pretty femme before mm-hmm. I transitioned. So many people were, I think, less surprised than I was. And, pretty much people took it pretty smoothly. I didn't get a lot of strong reactions. Mm-hmm. Some people sort of drifted off away from my life then, and who knows what that, mm-hmm. if being trans had something to do with it. But I can't say I remember anybody being shocked.
Right. Okay. So when you said you were a bit femme at this point already, how would you describe that? You had like long hair, or the way you dressed?
I did. I've had long hair since I was in college.
I had long hair in college too.
You know, and I was sort of aware that the transgender thing was bubbling up by then, and was trying to express that in my daily life, and it showed.
And your family was supportive of your decision, your discovery?
Yeah, it took a little adjusting. I think they had to work some to adjust to it. But yes, everybody in my family was supportive right away, and I'm really glad for that, because it's a tough time, and transitioning,
right.
and you need your family and friends to help you get through it.
Okay. So let's talk about the process of transitioning. So I understand that there's two parts. There's medicine you can take, and then there's surgery part. So let's talk about the medications.
Well, I want to stop you right there,
okay.
and say there's medical and there's surgery and that stuff, but a much bigger part of transition is social.
Okay.
It's really about getting used to the new gender and getting, learning how to interact with people in it, because while it feels in many respects more natural, it's also, there are things that you don't have the hang of at first. And so coming out to people and interacting with them in, those years around when you're transitioning is, I would say, by far the biggest part of transition.
Okay.
Now, a lot of trans people also take hormones, and I do. Okay. And, that for me, that was a huge deal. It was, I say that, a lot of being trans is social. Oh, is it time already?
I'm being told we're going to wrap up. Do you have time to stay a bit longer? And then we can put it up on the web?
Sure.
Okay, great. I'm being told our time is up. So let's see here. Our next show, wow, is September 12th. Stay tuned for Stranger Music and What the Bleep coming up after this on KMVT. And catch the rest of this interview on johnwantsanswers.com. All right, thanks. Great show.
Yes. So the hormone, for me at least, there must be something physical, medical about being trans, because when I started taking hormones, it's like I'd been thirsty all my life and I'd finally found out about water. It was, my body really liked them.
Okay.
And this is, you can compare to famous computer scientist Alan Turing.
Yes.
We could have dedicated it to him, but he's been dead a long time.
Yeah.
So,
was he transgender or is he homosexual?
He was homosexual, but he was forced to take more or less the same drugs I'm taking now.
Oh, they're trying to drug him straight.
Yes, or at least not sexual. But he was forced to take estrogen, and he became suicidal.
But you did not.
No, rather the opposite effect for me. And so, the hormones have a really different effect on different people. And so, I take that as, yeah, my body likes them.
So when you take estrogen, tell me if this is correct or not, you get less facial hair.
A little.
And you begin to grow breasts, is that?
Yes.
How it works?
Grew them myself. And yeah, and other things, the, fat distributes a bit differently. And, there are weird things. My fingernails aren't as strong since I've been on it. Maybe I'm old too. I took estrogen and I got older at the same time. So it's.
And so when women transition to men, they take the hormone of testosterone.
Testosterone, often. Not always, but often.
And I guess the opposite happens, they grow hair.
Yes, testosterone will bring out a beard or
does it take
make
away,
you go bald sometimes.
Does it take away breasts? Is that, or not?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Or at least not to a great degree. So often, I say often, it is not uncommon. It is fewer than half of trans people have genital surgery. And I think something is similar for trans men and breast reduction. I don't know. But so if we're talking about surgery, we're talking about a large minority of trans people.
So most just take the hormones and leave it at that.
Well, there's a great deal of variation. And, some, and the variation has many reasons behind it. Some people are, just don't want these things. Some people want them, can't afford them, or can't medically deal with them. Some people, I've heard people say that, well, they would, but, they don't there are side effects or something about the results that they don't like. And
okay. So let's very briefly talk about the surgery part. So if you're transitioning to a woman, I guess the penis is removed, and then
actually kind of turned inside out.
It's turned inside out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And bits are rearranged a bit, but it's.
And so, is there something like the clitoris?
Yes.
That they get? Okay.
It's actually. In my case, they take a bit of the head of the penis and move it around, and these are analogous parts in the body anyway. They sort of develop similarly when you're a fetus, and so they take bits and move them around. And, yeah.
And as far as the sexual pleasure is the same.
How can you tell?
Exactly.
It's sexual pleasure. I like it. I
wonder what the opposite, transitioning to a man. I guess there'd have to be a prosthetic penis.
There are a wide variety of techniques that I'm not really very up on, but yeah, there's there are men as well as women whose genitals are a wonder of modern technology.
But there's a limit to medical science. For example, a trans woman could not give birth, I guess.
Presumably not.
Presumably not.
Maybe there's somebody in a lab somewhere and they pull the switch and the lightning comes. I don't know, but it's...
Do you think a trans man could inseminate a female?
I don't see how. Yeah. But again, I'm not going to speak for all of the medical science that is out there.
Okay, so what's the legal point at which you have transitioned? At what point on legal documents could you say, check the female box?
Well, there's not really much of a standard for that. Pretty much you're presented with a lot of boxes and you just start checking away. And different parts of the government work differently. So, changing your gender at the DMV is different from changing your gender at the Social Security office, which is different from changing your gender at the passport office.
Are you free to marry a man or a woman, or I don't know? How does that work?
Badly, for the most part. It's very nice to finally be, once again, in a state where people can just marry people and not have to worry about what gender they are. Because what happens in some states is, yes, you can go into the county courthouse and they will, they will decide, okay, you are male and you are female, and therefore you can get a wedding license. And then you discover after your husband or wife dies and there's a court case and their brother wants to inherit or something, and they take you to court and the judge decides that they were wrong when you got married and that you weren't allowed to get married in the first place. This really has happened to people.
Wow.
And, so it's very nice that in California, I can marry whoever I feel like marrying, as long as I can get them to want to marry me.
Yes.
And
Well, that's good news.
and
I'm told we have to wrap up for real now.
oh,
So any last comments before we go?
well, thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Very informative. And check us out again. And I've already closed the show once, so.
So we'll just wait.
Okay, we're out. Thanks for staying late, everybody.